Shadows twist where whispers grow. The edge of light begins to flow. A world unseen through fractured glass, where futures meet the echoes past. Step closer now, the veil is thin. A riddle starts where dreams begin. The experimental medium calls your name. Nothing here will be the same.
We are diving into, well, a really bizarre chapter from the mid-19th century. The story of the Fox sisters and those weird spirit wrappings that many people think basically kicked off the whole modern spiritualism movement.
And it's fascinating because we've got a bunch of sources that look at it really differently.
Right. What have we got?
Well, there's wrappings that startled the world, that one seems, maybe more inclined to believe it was real.
Okay.
Then there's Rochester knockings, which is like more analytical, maybe a bit scientific in its approach.
Contrasting.
Definitely. And then, bam, the death blow to spiritualism. You can get the angle there.
Yeah, sounds pretty final.
Supposedly authorized by two of the Fox sisters themselves. And then, just to mix it up more, the missing link in modern spiritualism, which is from the third Fox sister, gives another viewpoint entirely.
Okay, so quite the range. Our mission today, then, is to sort of navigate these different accounts.
Yeah, look at the reported facts, the explanations people threw out there, and, the impact it all had.
We want to give you a clear picture of this strange episode, but without getting totally bogged down in, like, every tiny detail.
Sounds good. Where do we start? Hydesville.
Let's do it. Right at the beginning, Hydesville.
Okay, so the story really gets going. December 11th, 1847, John D. Fox, his family, they move into this house in Hydesville, New York.
And it wasn't just any old house, was it? It already had a bit of a local reputation.
It did, yeah. Kind of known for being a bit uncanny, spooky maybe.
And pretty much right after they moved in, the sisters, Kate and Margaret, started hearing these weird rapping sounds.
Yeah, the famous rappings.
We've even got like an artist's drawing of them first hearing the noises and a photo of the actual cottage. It's kind of wild to see the real place.
It really grounds it. And what's interesting for listeners to think about is these noises weren't totally new when the Foxes showed up.
Oh, right. Tell us about that.
Well, a guy who lived there before, William Dusler, he testified he heard weird sounds before the Foxes.
No kidding.
Yeah, he said he tried to find a reason, even dug around in the cellar, but he couldn't find anything ordinary. He ended up thinking it felt, well, supernatural.
That definitely adds a layer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't just, poof, the Foxes arrive, the rapping starts.
Exactly. And it wasn't just Dusler. Some neighbors, Norman Ayres and John Irish, they certified something else kind of odd.
What was that?
They said the well on the property was, and this is a quote, very offensive and bad back in the summer of 1844.
Oh, offensive how? Just smelly.
Sounds like it. And they specifically noted it was really close to the cellar. Makes you wonder, about environmental factors maybe? Bad air. Strange acoustics.
Yeah, could that explain something? Even if not conscious rapping, it's a thought.
It's definitely a piece of the puzzle. But as you can imagine, news about these weird raps didn't just stay in Hydesville.
Oh, I bet not. Word travels fast, especially with something like this.
Totally. Local talk turned into, well, big news. And suddenly the Fox family is right in the middle of all this attention.
Intense. They moved right first Rochester.
Yeah, Rochester. And then around 1851, they headed to New York City. They started holding public meetings, séances, at their place on East 13th Street.
Imagine the buzz around that address back then. People must have been lining up.
It seems like belief grew incredibly fast in New York. By 1854, so just a few years later, one investigator, and he was actually a skeptic, estimated there were something like 40,000 true believers in the city.
40,000. That quickly, wow.
It's a huge number for that time. It really shows, how ready people were for something like this, maybe looking beyond just purely materialistic views of the world. Spiritualism found fertile ground.
It really speaks to that fascination.
Yeah.
And even big names got involved. Horace Greeley.
The editor of the New York Tribune, yeah. He went to a demonstration.
What did he think?
Well, he wrote about it. He noted that despite investigations, nobody could figure out where the sounds were actually coming from. That kind of mainstream attention. Huge boost for the movement.
Absolutely. And the sisters were traveling, too, not just New York.
Right. In 1852, Mrs. Fox and Margaret went to Philadelphia, and that's where Margaret met Dr. Elisha Kent Kane.
The explorer.
The famous Arctic explorer, yeah. Apparently, he was quite taken with Margaret pretty much immediately.
A little romance mixed into the mystery.
Yeah.
You can see how this story just kept growing, drawing people in.
Yeah, it had all the elements. But critically, it wasn't just the Fox sisters anymore, was it? The rapping phenomenon started popping up elsewhere.
Right, it was spreading.
Exactly. We hear about rappings with Mrs. Bushnell in Cincinnati, Dr. Phelps' family in Connecticut, Mrs. Margaret Cooper in Boston.
So whatever was going on, or whatever people thought was going on, it wasn't unique to the Foxes anymore.
Which suggests either a wider, genuine phenomenon, or maybe just, widespread imitation. Copycats.
Right, so you've got all this excitement, belief, spreading like wildfire. It was inevitable that skeptics would start digging deeper, looking for, well, normal explanations.
Precisely. And even early on, like 1848, there was this pamphlet out of Canandaigua. It had statements from John Fox and neighbors basically saying, yes, these raps happen. So an initial effort to just establish the facts.
But then came the theories trying to explain it without spirits.
Exactly. And one of the big ones involved anatomy.
Anatomy. Okay, this is where it gets kind of fascinatingly weird. Tell me about that.
Well, this theory, it's detailed in the Rochester Knockings book. It focuses on the knee joint.
The knee, seriously.
Yeah, the knee. It points out, the big bones there, femur, tibia, the muscles. And the argument is that this joint, structurally, can actually make pretty loud sounds.
Loud sounds how? Like cracking your knuckles?
Sort of, but maybe louder and more controlled. The idea involves, voluntary muscle contractions causing a brief partial dislocation, or maybe subluxation is a better word, of the joint.
Popping the knee joint on command.
Apparently, yes. And this action could supposedly produce sounds very similar to the rappings people reported. The text even says, if your leg or body is touching something, like a table, the force could make it vibrate noticeably.
Wow. Okay, so a potential biological trick to explain the supernatural. That's a compelling counter-narrative.
Definitely.
But the source itself admits not everyone can just do this, right? It's not easy.
That's the key point, yeah. It acknowledges that most people find it really hard, if not impossible, to replicate this knee wrapping.
Which does make you wonder then, how could these young girls, Kate and Margaret, do it so consistently and convincingly if it's that difficult?
Exactly. That's the big question mark over that theory. Was it really the explanation, or just an explanation that fit some cases?
And the knee wasn't the only body part they suspected, was it? Something about toes.
You got it. Another theory brought up toe joints and heels.
Okay, how would that work?
The idea was you could maybe wrap your toe joints together or tap your heel, and it might be harder to spot the movement, especially, if someone's wearing shoes or if their feet are on cushions. It could muffle things, hide the action.
That makes sense. Less obvious movement. But again, there were people who said they saw things that contradicted even that, weren't there?
Right. You get these accounts from witnesses who claimed they observed the mediums, sometimes even disrobed, standing on pillows, and the sounds still happen.
Which, if true, would seem to rule out knees and feet, at least in those specific situations.
Exactly. It kept the mystery alive for people who saw that. They'd think, okay, it's not the knees, it's not the toes. What is it?
It's like whack-a-mole with explanations. For every theory, someone pops up with a counter-observation.
Pretty much. And then there's that detail that kept coming up. The sounds often seem to come from near the feet.
Which could support the toe heel idea.
It could lend support, yeah, but, could the sound just be cleverly directed? Or maybe multiple methods were used. It doesn't absolutely prove it was the feet.
And there was that other weird thing, not about body parts, but about a pencil during questions.
Oh, right. H, who we think is George Haskins, he observed something interesting. When they were doing sessions where spirits supposedly answered written questions by rapping,
Yeah.
he noticed the raps seemed to happen right when he deliberately let his pencil rest a bit longer on the paper.
Huh. Suggesting maybe the medium was watching the pencil and rapping on cue?
That's one interpretation, yeah. A subtle signal, or maybe even some kind of physical trigger linked to the pencil's movement or pressure. Not supernatural, just cleverly timed.
So we've got these natural explanations floating around: knees, toes, subtle cues, but also these persistent doubts, these observations that don't quite fit. Messy.
Very messy.
Uh,
And then we get to 1888, and the whole story just takes this incredibly dramatic turn.
the confession?
The confessions. A huge moment. Margaret Fox Kane and Catherine Fox Jenkin, they authorized this book, The Death Blow to Spiritualism.
Can't get much clearer than that title.
Nope. And in it, they basically declare the whole thing, the entire spiritualism phenomenon they started, was a total fraud from the beginning.
Wow. They actually said they started it and it was all fake.
Yep. They even talked about poetic justice, that they started this deception, so it was right that they should be the ones to expose it, and they condemned anyone still practicing it.
That sounds about as conclusive as you can get. Did they say how they did it?
Yes. The book explicitly says the wrappings were done by a voluntary muscular contraction of joints.
So confirming that knee theory? Or maybe toe joints?
Pretty much aligning with those anatomical explanations we talked about. Case closed, right?
You'd think so. But there's always a but in this story, isn't there?
There usually is. It's important to know the text mentions Margaret had these spells before, times when she threatened to denounce spiritualism.
Ah. So maybe it wasn't a sudden, clear-headed decision. Could she have been unstable? Or pressured? Maybe paid off?
Those questions definitely hang over the confession. Was it entirely voluntary? Was she telling the whole truth or just the version she wanted people to hear then? It adds complexity.
It really does. What about the other sister involved early on, Leah? Did she join the confession?
No. Mrs. Underhill, Leah Fox, she stayed completely quiet after her sisters published the exposé.
Silent disagreement. Or maybe just wanting to stay out of the firestorm.
Could be either. Or maybe silence was its own kind of admission for some people. We don't really know her motive.
And the wider spiritualist community, how did they react to the founders basically saying, oops, just kidding?
Well, reports say the big mediums in New York were excessively guarded, playing it very cautious.
I bet.
They sort of had to acknowledge the Fox sisters' importance, where it all began, but they seemed hesitant to just accept the confession entirely.
Any specific reactions?
Yeah, another medium, Mrs. E.A. Wells, she expressed shock. But she also seemed skeptical that Margaret would actually go through with fully exposing the methods. She even asked a reporter, kind of doubtfully, "You don't believe she will do it, do you?"
Interesting. So even among other mediums, there was this sense of maybe disbelief, or maybe hoping it wasn't true, or maybe questioning Margaret's motives or stability.
Exactly. And even the confession book itself, despite the title, kind of leaves a tiny crack open.
How so?
Well, the question remained for some people. Did Margaret really know how the wraps were made? Even if she confessed to fraud, maybe she didn't fully grasp the mechanism herself. Some still suggested an occult agency might have been involved somehow, maybe using the sisters without their full understanding.
Wow. So even the death blow wasn't quite fatal for the believers. The mystery persisted.
For some, absolutely. And that brings us to the other book, the counter-narrative from the sister who didn't confess.
Right, Leah's book, The Missing Link in Modern Spiritualism.
Exactly, and Leah Fox Brown. And her book paints a totally different picture.
How different?
She argues that these abilities, these psychic powers, were actually inherited, ran in the family.
Inherited, like genetically.
That's the suggestion. She gives examples like a great-grandmother who was a somnambulist, a sleepwalker, and an aunt who had prophetic dreams.
Okay, so she's reframing it. Not a hoax they cooked up, but maybe a genuine, if weird, family trait bubbling up.
That's the idea she puts forward. It completely changes the potential meaning of the Hydesville wrappings.
And did she talk about those earlier events in the Hydesville house before her younger sisters even started the wrapping craze?
Yes, she does. She includes accounts from neighbors about strange things happening in that house before the Fox family even lived there.
Like what?
Unsettling noises, again. And one story about a child feeling something frighteningly cold moving around her in the dark.
Okay, so she's doubling down on the idea that the house was weird, independent of her sister's later actions, trying to establish a pattern of genuine phenomena.
Seems like it. Building a case that something unexplained was tied to that specific place.
What about her own reaction? When she first heard about what Kate and Margaret were doing in Hydesville, was she in on it from the start, according to her book?
No, interestingly, she says she was skeptical at first. Her book describes it as her own investigation, her own journey to figuring out what was going on. It reads more like she became convinced over time, not that she planned it.
So a personal journey to belief,
Yeah.
rather than immediate acceptance or, conspiracy.
That's the narrative presented, yes.
And besides the family history and the house's reputation, does Leah's book offer other evidence for genuine spiritual stuff?
Oh, yeah. It's full of testimonies for people who claimed they witnessed real manifestations through the Fox sisters or other mediums they knew.
What kinds of things? Still just rapping.
Rapping, yes, but specifically rappings that answered questions with uncanny accuracy, things that supposedly only the questioner knew, even secret thoughts.
Okay, that raises the stakes beyond just making noises. It points to some kind of intelligence behind it.
Exactly, and that's the huge question, right? What was that intelligence? Was it just clever perception by the medium? Hypnosis, mesmerism, or something else?
The million-dollar question. What are those scientific investigations? The Buffalo doctors who came up with the knee joint theory. How does Leah address them?
The missing link acknowledges them, yeah. It mentions the Buffalo doctors and their knee joint idea.
But she dismisses it.
Her book argues their hypothesis was wrong, basically. It points to phenomena witnessed by others that seemed impossible to explain with just knee popping.
Like what specifically? What couldn't the knees explain?
Things like bells moving under tables with real force, heavy objects shifting. It was argued that simple joint manipulation couldn't generate that kind of physical power or movement at a distance.
Right, that's a fair point. Rapping is one thing. Moving furniture is another level entirely.
A completely different level. And Leah herself, it seems, wasn't afraid of scrutiny.
Yes.
Well, there's this fair challenge she apparently published in Cincinnati newspapers. She offered to be examined by a committee of women to prove she wasn't using any hidden mechanical devices.
Bold move. Putting herself out there for inspection.
It shows a certain confidence, or at least a desire to appear confident and refute accusations of trickery.
And people were taking it seriously, right?
Yep.
Not just dismissing them as crackpots.
Apparently so. Prominent citizens in Cleveland actually invited the Fox sisters to come demonstrate so they could investigate the phenomena themselves. Suggests genuine curiosity, maybe even belief, among some influential people.
It wasn't just rapping anymore, though, was it? The movement grew to include all sorts of other alleged phenomena.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Leah's book touches on this wider range. Things like automatic writing, mediums channeling messages through writing.
Yeah.
Reports of luminous hands appearing in dark séances, seeing shadowy forms, objects flying around rooms. It goes way beyond simple knocks.
Which, of course, makes finding one single explanation even harder.
Much harder. And you had respected figures like Robert Dale Owen, intellectual, politician adding his own experiences.
What did Owen claim to see?
Really extraordinary stuff. Raps happening on water or inside living trees. Seeing lights connected to the wraps, objects moving with absolutely no physical contact, things that, if true, would defy conventional physics.
Definitely pushes the boundaries of belief. And it wasn't just physical stuff either. There were claims of healing.
That's right. Leah's book includes a testimony from a Mrs. Davis. She claimed she'd been paralyzed, but was healed through spirit intervention, with Leah acting as the medium.
Personal stories like that must have been incredibly powerful for believers. Proof of tangible benefits.
Absolutely. And the book includes letters, too. People writing in, sharing their own experiences, expressing deep belief. Some really wild accounts.
Like what?
Claims of direct spirit writing in Greek appearing via a baby's hand.
Wow, okay.
And one really vivid personal story titled, "A Crowd of Spirits Made Visible by Lightning."
Goodness, these aren't just subtle knocks anymore.
Not at all. These personal accounts, however strange they sound to us now, clearly formed the bedrock of belief for many people involved.
But Leah's book doesn't just present the believer's side uncritically, does it? It acknowledges problems.
It does, yeah. It admits the challenges, how hard it was and is to tell genuine manifestations from outright fraud or even just, people fooling themselves.
Self-deception.
Right. There's even this interesting idea mentioned that while faith wasn't strictly necessary for things to happen, being openly hostile or insulting could apparently stop manifestations.
Which is tricky, isn't it? Because it means intense skepticism could be blamed for a lack of evidence. You didn't see anything because you didn't believe enough.
Exactly. It creates a kind of catch-22 for investigators.
Mm-hmm.
The book also notes the harm done by fake mediums, how they damage the reputation of the whole movement. So there was an awareness of the fraud problem from within.
And Leah herself, did she stick with it, despite her sister's confessions and all the controversy?
According to her book and other accounts, yes. She apparently kept believing and even held occasional private séances long after she stopped doing public demonstrations. It seems like it was a deeply held personal conviction for her.
Right to the end. Any other weird examples from her book?
One last intriguing one, a spirit supposedly communicating music. not by playing an instrument, but by rapping out letter sequences that corresponded to notes on a piano.
Huh. Complex. So, bringing this all together, it's just a tangle, isn't it? No easy answer.
Not at all. The Fox sisters and their rappings, they definitely lit a fire, started a global movement that fascinated millions.
Yeah. And people tried hard to explain it away, the knee joint thing being the most famous attempt.
Right. Then the sisters themselves dropped this bombshell confession. It was all a trick. But even that confession has layers, questions about why they did it if they were pressured.
And despite the confession, despite the explanations, a lot of people just kept believing.
They did, citing their own experiences, phenomena like moving objects or accurate messages, things that just didn't seem to fit the simple trickery explanation for them. Leah's book really captures that enduring belief.
So we're left with these big questions still hanging there, aren't we? For you, the listener, to really chew on.
Definitely. Were the sisters just hoaxers from day one? Simple as that.
Or was the confession later maybe not the full story? Was it genuine, complete?
And can everything reported, the raps, the moving tables, the messages across all these different mediums, can it all really be explained away naturally? Or is there something genuinely mysterious still lurking in this story?
It makes you think, doesn't it, about how quickly beliefs can catch on and spread. The power of suggestion is huge.
And that basic human need, maybe, to understand the unknown, to find meaning, even when the evidence is contradictory or confusing.
So the final thought we want to leave you with is this. What is this whole deep dive into the Fox sisters, with all its claims and counterclaims, its believers and debunkers? What does it really tell us about belief itself?
Yeah, about how we decide what's real. And that constant tension between wanting to believe in something more and the pull of skepticism. It's a story that still resonates, I think.
Whispers creeping through the haze, shadows dance in twisted ways, echoes hum from worlds unseen. This is where the strange convene. Step into the unknown mind, secrets hidden, twist and bind, truths that linger in between. Welcome to the spectral stream. A voice that stirs the silent night, guides you through the fading light. Journeys deep beyond the real, where unseen forces are revealed. Step into the unknown mind, secrets hidden, twist and bind, truths that linger in between. Welcome to the spectral stream. Electric sparks and haunted tones, reality's edge becomes your home. Questions rise like fragile smoke, the uncharted realms silently spoke. Step into the unknown mind, secrets hidden, twist and bind, truths that linger in between. Welcome to the spectral stream. Questions rise like fragile smoke. The uncharted realm silently spoke.